are with everybody and along the entire Gulf. I do see that it has just hit 2 o'clock Eastern. So we're going to start in and just do a couple introductions and get started here. We're really excited about today. We have not done our webinar Wednesday since June. Was that our last one?
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Yeah, that was our last one that we had done. And so this is our first one for this school year. We will do them at the first Wednesday of every month. And I'm Joyce Whitby. I'm the consultant here with Education Associates. And we've got with us Michelle Magram, who's our National Sales and Marketing Manager. And then it is totally my honor to have Dr. Amy Spriggs here with us. I will do a little bit more of an intro for you all. I just want to give you a little bit of housekeeping before I get started. The first thing you'll notice is that we have our closed captioning going on, and we will say, we know it's not the best closed captioning. It's the one that comes with Google Classroom and Google Slides. But I've had friends who are hearing impaired, and they were saying, you know what, it's good, and we're learning how to do it. So if anybody wants to give us any pointers on that, we'll be glad to accept that. We're always learning from everybody. And I do want to thank you in advance for filling out our little short survey at the end of the webinar, because that's where you could tell us things like that. Here's what your thoughts are, but also because it really helps us. And we will be doing this at the first Wednesday of every month as we go through this school year. So we're really thrilled to kind of get back into it. And we're looking forward to getting face-to-face back with everybody. So as we're going along. As I mentioned, we've got Dr. Spriggs with us, and she's at University of Kentucky. And she is an internationally recognized autism expert. I'm on it, Amy, I had to say it. She's associate professor in the Department of Early Childhood and Special Education and Rehabilitation Counseling at U of K, and leading authority in the field of evidence-based practices. So we may find that she's going to use the recording for this for some of her students to kind of catch up and figure out what they've missed in the past, just saying for any of Dr. Spriggs' students coming on through. Thank you, Amy, for coming with us here today. We're glad to have you. Before I dive in and turn on over to Dr. Spriggs, I do want to take a look and let's see who's here with us. So let's see. It should be popping up with a question for y'all that just says, what's your role in education? And you should be able to click and let us know. I'll chat for a little bit of time so we can get the most number of folks here represented. And I'll give it just another little moment. I think we are getting to a quorum. And so now people are entering in chat what the other is. I'm going to put that little window up again for me. All right. So it looks like, and we'll go ahead and I'll hit save on that. We've got about 20% of the folks are classroom sped teacher. And then we've got 12% in transition. Thank you for coming. And administrators, 16%, wonderful. And then let's see some of the other pieces: school psychologists, program specialists, an SLP, exceptional children program specialist, compliance specialist, vocational instructor, occupational therapist. Thank you so much. A BCBA, all across the board. Wonderful. Thank you all so much. I appreciate that. And that does help us make sure that we can really gear this towards you and your interest, because we know this is what we're all about at Education Associates. One size does not fit all. And we really, I think we just live and breathe this all the time, Michelle, don't you? I mean, it's just really.
Absolutely. That's what we're all about here.
That's what's woven into our fabric on a daily life. And we know what the life is like. And we just appreciate all of you so much. I will just give you a very quick background on us. We've been here. Oh my gosh, Michelle, I'm going to have to change the slide. We are actually we're in our 41st year. I may not admit it till we turn 42, but it's not just the company has been here for over 40 years. the CEO has been here for that time and is chief academic officer. And what this company, what the products look like, what the curriculum looked like 40 years ago is not what it looks like today. It has changed over time based on your input, based on educators' input, and it focuses in on hands-on, evidence-based practices. I did not change this slide for today. This is the same slide I always use. Data collection, UDL. I'm really meeting students where they are at, and it's both CTE and academics. And we try and meet students where they're at, meet teachers where they're at, and we've got a lot of different tools for you. I don't have to take my word for it. We've been around long enough that it's been acknowledged and validated by a number of different sources. And front and center, we received an endorsement from CASE just last year during the pandemic. It took a while to get through that. And Dr. Spriggs was a big part of this. We used a lot of the research that she had conducted at multiple sites or with multiple different populations throughout the country. So it is really been approved by a group that we highly have great expectations for. Our curriculum has two parts to it: project discovery, which is our career awareness, exploration, and job skills training, and achieve life skills. There's a lot in here. They are hands-on kits. They are really easily modified for different populations. We have an adapted series that's very specifically modified, but all of these kits can be modified as you go on through. So whether it's the career preparation or life skills, there's a lot in there. That's all I'm going to say about the curriculum. This is not a product pitch. If you would like to learn more, we're happy to do so. We do personal Zoom overviews all the time, and we'll show you at the end where you can go on the website to find it, or you can just kind of go hunt around on the website and find it. But I'm not going to keep talking. I'm going to hand this on over to Dr. Spriggs, and she already has control over the mouse and such. And I'm going to do my last two clicks before I say go for it. But without further ado, I'm really happy to have you here, Amy, both as a mentor and somebody who I've learned so much from, and as a friend. So truly appreciate you being here. I'm going to turn my video off, but I'll still be here, as will Michelle. And we're
I'm going to turn my video off and I'm going to mute, but I will be in the chat, you guys. So if you have any thoughts, questions, anything like that, I'll be there to answer them for you. So sorry, Amy, I just wanted to jump in and say that real quick.
That's okay.
Thank you.
So I'm also happy to be here. So I was asked to come and speak to you today about evidence-based practices in special education. And let me see if I can get my mouse to work. There we go. So just to start, I'm going to give you like a brief overview of what evidence-based practices are. So if any of you are familiar with this term, you'll know that we're called as educators to use strategies that have been shown to be effective in teaching appropriate behaviors and skills, and or to decrease inappropriate behaviors for a given population. The problem becomes apparent when you start looking for evidence-based practices that we really don't have a universally agreed upon definition of what an evidence-based practice in special education is. It makes it really hard to define what those are, and it makes it even harder to find them. So I'm hoping today to help you a little bit with that. So, like I said, there's no universally agreed upon method. But with that being said, most researchers who are studying evidence-based practices are really looking at very similar things. We look at the rigor of the research that's being conducted. So how well was the research conducted? Did they control for things outside of the study so that we can say the intervention actually did work? We are looking for the evidence. So did the research show a positive effect? There also has to be a certain quantity of rigorous research. So it's not okay to run one study and say that something is evidence-based, but we actually have to have quite a few studies run. And also we look at who is doing the research. And that doesn't mean we're looking for experts in the field that are doing the research. It means we're looking at a number of people doing the research. If I create a curriculum and I'm the only one doing research on that curriculum, there's a lot of bias that comes into it. So I need some other group of researchers to study that curriculum or that procedure. So we're looking for different researchers doing research with lots of different types of participants. And then we also look at the participants. So at the end of the day, something does become evidence-based based on all these factors, and it's based on the participants that have shown positive results. So most of our evidence-based practices in special education are specific to autism. Do not hear that means they don't work for everyone, but we do have a whole lot of research with the population of individuals who have autism or who are autistic. With that being said, most of that research is also been conducted if the population of individuals has autism. A lot of times they also have another disability, like an intellectual disability or a communication delay. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. If you are looking for evidence-based practices specific to autism, there are two really good resources, and you can Google those. What you're going to find is they both have a list of evidence-based practices that they endorse. There is a lot of overlap between the two, but they don't exactly match. And this is where we get into we don't have one really good definition. So because of that, one group of people looking at what's evidence-based might be using a certain set of standards, and another group might be using another. So some things get coded as evidence-based under one set of standards, but not another. Really, though, if you look at it, a lot of their evidence-based practices are really similar. So I'm going to get into that on the next slide, kind of what our foundational evidence-based practices are. And even if one of those groups doesn't call it something specific, when you read the description, you're like, oh, that sounds just like the other group's description of a different evidence-based practice. So if you aren't working with individuals with autism, you might want to be looking at where we might find evidence-based practices just in general. And so the Institute of Education Sciences has a large database called What Works Clearinghouse. And you want to Google it, it really has a ton of really good information on what works with different populations that we serve in schools. There's a lot of money that goes into What Works Clearinghouse, making sure that we are only putting forth true evidence-based practices. They also tell us as researchers what standards we should be using, not only when we conduct our research, but when we're consuming research. So it tells me how to look at a research article and know if it's rigorous or not. There's also published literature reviews. I have published a few where I've determined if something is evidence-based. The problem with that is that if you're not in academia, you don't have access to those. So again, we really hope that those things make it into that What Works Clearinghouse so that you can, as a practitioner, actually find it. And then a lot of times we find evidence-based practices embedded within curriculum. And this really makes sense if you think about it, because schools want to put their money behind something that should work. And an evidence-based practice is something that's been studied over time, and it's been proven to work over time, so it should work. So most curriculum that districts will buy should include evidence-based practices, just because it costs money to purchase curriculum. And if you're purchasing curriculum that's not grounded in the research, doesn't include evidence-based practices, you're really taking a risk that you're not going to end up with a curriculum that works. So I also will put one more plug in to those evidence-based practices that are specific to autism. I was a classroom teacher before I was a professor, and I taught children with and without autism, but all of my students had more moderate to severe disabilities. The evidence-based practices listed on those two sites are all things that worked with all of my students. So I would argue that even though they were studied with participants who had the label or diagnosis of autism, those practices do work for, we say anyone with a disability, but honestly, a lot, what I'm going to show you in just a minute, will work with any of you. They really do work to teach the majority of our population with and without disabilities. So no matter where you look, whether it's on those two autism, they're not websites, but there's websites that house the information, or you're looking at What Works Clearinghouse, or you're looking at published literature reviews or curriculum, these are the foundational evidence-based practices that cross all of them. There's no one in our field that would say that these 5 practices are not evidence-based. We have years of research to support using each one of these things while we're teaching individuals with disabilities. So the first one is reinforcement. This has probably the longest history of increasing behaviors. It needs to be provided consistently and in a meaningful way. But basically, reinforcement is anything that follows a behavior that will then increase the likelihood of that behavior occurring again in the future. So it's anything that an individual does, like once a student engages in a behavior, it could be like like they've demonstrated a new skill for the first time, and then the teacher or the clinician or the therapist or the parent provides something after that. If that thing that's been provided increases the likelihood that the behavior will occur in the future, it's considered reinforcement. It's almost always paired with other evidence-based practices, such as prompting or time delay. And it's usually the first thing tried by practitioners when trying to teach a new skill. It's the thing we start with. All of my students are taught to do something called a reinforcer preference assessment. We try to identify what's reinforcing, because reinforcement is individualized, and it can only be considered reinforcement if it actually leads to increased behavior. So examples can include verbal praise, high fives, food, token charts, playtime, iPads. It could be anything that's desired by the student. But just because I'm telling you that a high five works doesn't mean that a high five is reinforcing to everyone. If it's reinforcing, it increases the likelihood of a behavior. If it's not reinforcing, it won't. So some of our students are easy to reinforce, like a good job is enough, or a pat on the back is enough. Some of our students require a lot more intrusive reinforcement, things like iPad time. Some of our students will even need things like food. That's a whole nother, we could give a whole presentation on the use of food, but there's a whole lot more to the ins and outs of reinforcement and why it works. But this is just like a little overview. And just remember that what I find reinforcing might not be reinforcing to you. So that's the same with the student you're working with. You want to find something that they're willing to work for, and you want to provide the one that's the most natural. So if a student will work for a smile or a good job, then that's where you want to, that's the reinforcement you want to provide. It becomes really awkward when you provide an M&M for sitting down. I'm not saying we don't do that, but if you can find another more appropriate natural reward in that time that serves as a reinforcement, that would be more preferred. So then we will get into prompting. Prompting can include any help that's given to a learner that assists the learner in using a specific skill or behavior. So this is something we, like reinforcement, prompting is something that we probably already do, even if we didn't know it was evidence-based. The way in which we provide prompting is what makes it evidence-based. So sometimes you'll see it referred to as errorless learning or near errorless learning. Errorless, it's a hard word to say. The prompting reduces incorrect responding as the learners acquire a new skill. So what we're doing with prompting is we're trying to stop an inappropriate behavior or an incorrect behavior from occurring before it occurs. So if I see a student is about to engage in a behavior that's an inappropriate response to my task direction, I will stop that behavior, prompt them so that they're practicing the correct behavior. We don't want them practicing incorrect behaviors. So think of it like giving a student a math worksheet. You don't want them to practice 20 problems wrong. You want to jump in and prompt at the first problem so that they can then practice 19 problems correctly. We wouldn't want to try to fix the error after they've already practiced it incorrectly 20 times. This is a foundational practice. It's been around for a very long time, and it's often used with other evidence-based practices. You might have heard of discrete trial training or pivotal response training, video modeling. A lot of those include prompting. One very common prompting strategy is a system of lease prompts. And this is where you identify a hierarchy of prompts. This can be individualized for your learners, but for me, most often I would provide the task direction. That's not a prompt. And then I might give a verbal prompt. So I repeat myself. And then I might give a model prompt where I model it for them. And then I'm going to give a full physical prompt where I physically help them to complete the task. Your prompting hierarchy can look different for different students. There are gesture prompts. There are partial physical prompts. There are different prompts that serve different individuals better. I taught a lot of children with autism. And so if I did a gesture prompt where I would gesture, they would just imitate me. They would just gesture. So it didn't serve my students well to have that as part of their prompt hierarchy. But if that's all it takes to get someone to complete a task, then that's what you should be using. So in that system of lease prompts, we provide the task direction and then we wait. If you're running a research study, you're going to wait a specific, very specific amount of time. In your classroom, you're going to provide the task direction and wait. If the student doesn't do anything, you're going to provide the first prompt, a verbal prompt, and then you're going to wait. And if they don't do anything, then you're going to provide the next level of prompt, and you keep going until you have helped that student complete the task. What's nice about this is that you use your personality and you use your students' characteristics to determine what prompts need to be given, and how intrusive the most intrusive prompt needs to be. Some students will follow your verbal prompt every time, and some do need a little physical help to complete certain tasks. So that's just like a brief overview on prompting. Again, I could teach a whole semester on each of these things, and I'm giving you guys about 30 or 40 minutes on all 5 of them. So I'm going to tell you some resources at the end of this that you can refer to. So time delay is another errorless learning method, or we call it near errorless. We can't actually prevent every error, but we try. This is my preferred evidence-based practice for teaching skills that are kind of rote, like what is this sight word? What is this object? Really just like there's one, I have a question and you have an answer. I use time delay for that. It is where we use one single type of prompt to ensure the learner demonstrates the target task. It's most often used with those discrete tasks, like I described, where there's like a definite beginning and end. And examples might include, in addition to identifying words, finding the correct answer on a worksheet or stating the answer to a question. It involves a delay between me, the teacher, the therapist, the parent, asking a question or providing a task direction. There's an amount of time, there's a time delay, and then there's a prompt. The difference between time delay and prompting is, in time delay, I need to use the prompt that I know without a doubt will get the right response. So I don't give them a chance to follow a verbal prompt unless I know the verbal prompt is going to work every time. So I might, depending on the task, it might have to be a model prompt. It might have to be a physical prompt. It just depends on what the task direction is. So you provide the task direction, you wait a predetermined amount of time, and then you provide the prompt. And so it's near errorless because you're not really allowing them to practice errors. You are providing that task direction, and then you immediately prompt after that delay. A few things to note about time delay is that when you pick your prompt, it's got to be based on your students' characteristics. It's not just about the teacher personality at this point. It really is uniquely individualized to the learners that you're working with. The delay is predetermined. It's most often 3 or 5 seconds. We have learners that have a hard time processing the task direction and then being able to give you a correct response in that time. So you would just predetermine that they might get 10 seconds. You might predetermine a delay, let's say of 10 seconds, and it's excruciating to wait. Then you know you've picked the wrong delay, and then tomorrow you're going to choose a smaller delay. Or you choose 3 seconds, and you can tell that your learners are trying to come up with an answer. They look like they're thinking, they look like they might be about to say something, but they can't get it out in 3 seconds. Tomorrow, you might have to give them more time. And that's okay. Outside of research, it's okay to figure out what delay is going to work best for you and your student. And then moving into modeling, modeling can be used to increase a learner's ability to perform a target behavior because it involves the learner observing someone correctly performing the target behavior. So it's watching someone do something and then you do it. The demonstration of the behavior before the learner is expected to demonstrate the behavior should serve as a primer for the behavior. So I'm going to show you what I want you to do, and then I'm going to let you do it. So I've given you the expectations. This is what it should look like. Now I'm going to let you have a turn. In addition, it can also be used as a prompt. So that these all kind of work together. It can be a prompt under prompting. Your model prompt can serve as a prompt just as your prompt. It can serve as one of the prompts in your system of lease prompts. And when it's used in that way, you're providing the child support while they're trying to do the behavior. So one model is, I'm going to show you before, and now you can try it. And one is, I see you're struggling. Let me model it for you. So I'm going to provide you some assistance. When modeling in person, it is helpful to have a second set of materials to model with. So I'll give you an example. So I have a folder here, and I want the student to open the folder and take out the piece of paper. So if I am going to model it and I say, open the folder, and then I close it, most of our students will open the folder and then they're going to close it. But if we both have a folder and I open one, then they have their own folder that they can open. So it really is a model, as opposed to me manipulating their materials in a way that can really be confusing. One really, probably the most researched modeling procedure that's used right now is video modeling. It involves a video depicting all of the steps in a task that needs to be completed. And then the student can watch, or the learner can watch the video. And there's so many benefits to a learner watching a video. One is a video is consistently the same every time, whereas a person might vary the way that they say something or do something, or like the materials might fall apart in the middle of it and then you have to start over. But a video is consistent. Once you have the video, you can show it the same, it's shown the same way every time. It can also be portable if you put it on a mobile device. So it may be viewed in the absence of another, meaning if I load the phone with all of the videos that a learner needs, I may not have to be with a learner for them to get a model when they need it. This is actually my current line of research. Teaching individuals with moderate to severe disabilities how to use the device that everybody else has. So it's a phone, to self-instruct. So I need to complete a task. I don't know how to do it. I'm going to use my phone, find a video that's been loaded, and now I can do the task without my teacher, without my mom or dad, without my BCBA, without my speech language pathologist. I can complete that task because I have help on my phone. And we have a ton of evidence to support using video modeling to teach almost any task to students with disabilities. The one that we don't have a ton of evidence on would be using video models for grade level academics. And I think it's because we haven't figured out how to capture the process of academics. We can teach students how to, we've been successful with like telling time or writing paragraphs, data entry, but what we're having them do is very prescribed. Like you're writing a paragraph, but I've prescribed what you're writing about. I can do that through a video. Not as much success with like solve an algebraic equation that changes every time, but we are working on that. But it's modeling, and video modeling specifically has been used for vocational tasks, daily living tasks, self-help, communication. There's a ton of research on using video models, like so much that we're really not conducting new research on that alone. If people want to do research, they would combine that with someone else. And then we have task analysis. So learners with developmental disabilities with or without autism often struggle with learning new skills or behaviors, especially when those new skills or behaviors have a lot of components. I would argue this is true for any learner, but we see this over and over again for our individuals with the more severe disabilities. So if we take a task and we task analyze it, that can be used to help break down and teach the bigger behaviors. So you take a big task and you break it down into simple steps, and each step truly is its own discrete thing. So let me give you an example of a task analysis. So washing your clothes. You have to go into the laundry room. You have to raise the lid on the washing machine. You have to put your clothes in. Depending on the machine, your task analysis will have to be contextually specific. In mine, you would pull out the soap drawer and you would measure your soap out, pour your soap in, close that door, close the big door, right? So I have each step task analyzed. And then what you can do is you can pair reinforcement, prompting, time delay, or modeling with each of those steps to help the learner complete the steps in the task analysis. What's also really nice about task analysis, and the reason it becomes evidence-based, is we only have to intervene on the steps that the students don't already know. So if you ask them to wash the clothes and they can do everything but put the soap in, then you have one skill to teach using one of these other evidence-based strategies. So that is a very, very small amount of information on the most foundational evidence-based practices in our field. If you Google any one of these terms, and you add EBP, so for evidence-based practice. After it, within the first 5, it'll be the first one for some of these, but within the first 5 Google hits, sorry, there will be something called a sorry, there'll be something called a brief packet from Eric, ERIC. It summarizes all of this. It gives you a little bit more information than I had time to. And it also gives you resources and research to back it. So it's not just me saying this, and it's not just a group of researchers saying it, it's really backed by the research. So if you're interested in looking at that, or I see there were some administrators on here, if you're trying to get this information into your teacher's hands, it's a really nice, brief, it's a little packet, like 4 or 5 pages, maybe 3 pages. You could print it out and get it in the hands of your teachers so they can actually see there's a description, there's directions for doing it, so that the people who are actually working with the kids can use it. How I got partnered up with this company and how I know everybody that's on this call is they were taking part of their curriculum, so the adapted series of their curriculum, and they wanted my opinion on how they could incorporate evidence-based practices into that. And so now that adaptive curriculum includes a component of all of these things. So it had reinforcement is just part of your teaching. Everyone should be doing it, but there's directions in there for using prompting, for using time delay. Each one of the lessons has a video model, and there's a task analysis to match that also includes a data sheet, so you can make data informed decisions. And so that's kind of how we got to know each other, is working on making sure that their curriculum was backed by research. And one thing to keep in mind when you're selecting evidence-based practices, hold on, my mouse is not working yet. You really want to take into consideration, those are like the 5 foundational ones. There are other evidence-based practices. Most of the others do include a component or more than one component of those 5. But you really have to think about the child and family that you're working with. What are their wants, needs of the child and that family? What you will find too when selecting your evidence-based practices is that some children will thrive. They will learn from all of them, but some of them will learn more efficiently or effectively using one versus the other, or a combination of the two. For example, the students I worked with would respond more favorably to a video model than a human model. And I think the reason is because on a video, I have a screen that captures their attention. They're watching what happens in that screen. When I'm modeling, I have everything in this environment that's also a distractor. They may not know what they're supposed to be looking at. We have some individuals we work with that the size of the screen might be too small for the video. They might not be able to see it, and they might need the human model. So you're really taking the child into consideration. This is a plug I put into my students. We always want to make sure that whatever we suggest can transfer from research to practice. I do think that the 5 foundational evidence-based practices do easily transfer into practice. We've been using them in applied settings like schools and clinics for a very long time, but they also have to be a contextual fit. We can't always show a video model. If you are pushing in students into a gen ed classroom, or you have students who get to spend their entire day in there, a video might be distracting. Or maybe you have to look at using something different, like you can use the video model, but you have to make sure you have headphones. Sometimes a model that's a human might not be contextually appropriate. It can be really stigmatizing to have me as like a one-on-one modeling everything for a student, when I can give them a phone that their peers also have, might be more contextually appropriate. And at the end of the day, Everything you do has to be sustainable. So if you are the teacher, you need to become comfortable with using these evidence-based practices and figure out which ones you can live with in your classroom. If you're an administrator, it's not going back and saying you have to include all of these every time you teach in your class. It's, here are some easy to implement practices that have evidence to support them. Take a look at them, and then maybe we can get together and talk about which ones you can incorporate into your classroom. It's not, you have to do all of this every single time. It's something that the teacher, the parent, those of you working with parents, that the parent can sustainably implement. And then we always want to make sure that we're basing our considerations on the principles that are listed here. So self-determination is a really big one. Someone is considered self-determined if they can make choices. They can make decisions about their actions, set goals for themselves, recognize their own strengths and weaknesses, or advocate for themselves. So sometimes we might actually ask, like, would you like, Amy to model this for you, or would you like to watch the video today? Or you give them a device and there's 20 videos and they get to pick the one that they watch. Or maybe there's just two, but it's like starting to help them make choices, starting to help them determine where they're going to get their help. We are really looking at the end of the day, increasing independence. It doesn't mean that they won't rely on their technology. It means they're not going to rely on me or you, that when they're in the grocery store and they need help finding a substitute for an ingredient, that they can use their phone to find that. It's relying on the prompts that we all rely on. I rely on my phone all the time. I rely on my phone for my calendar. I rely on my phone for when I'm at Kroger and I can't find, that's the grocery store here, and I can't find some weird ingredient. I can go on the Kroger app. It will tell me what aisle it's on. So then I've narrowed down my search. Now I only have to look on one aisle to try to find it. Teaching our students that same independence using those foundational evidence-based practices can help them lead to more independent adult lives. We also want to consider normalization. That occurs when our activities and our materials and the settings in which our students engage are the same as their same age peers. So giving them access to a phone when they're in like high school, when it's appropriate, giving them their models on a phone as opposed to a portable DVD player, or as opposed to a one-on-one paraprofessional. If we can get their model on the phone, that's a whole lot more normalized. And then thinking about the skills we're teaching too is really important. Like what skills do they need to then become, more independent adults? And then the functionality of our skills is also important. Those are the skills that people really need to be able to function in their everyday and natural environments. And so that is also contextually specific. So what we ask, what we're trying to teach our students to do should be things that do lead to a more self-determined, independent, normalized, and functionally appropriate, adult life. That's our goal. So when we consider which evidence-based practices we're selecting, those are the things I think that are critical to remember. So I think we have time for questions. I guess, Joy, you're going to help me with this part.
I'm going to help you. And Michelle's going to come on with me too, where we've been chatting with some of the folks on the chat line. But boy, oh boy, I always learn so much from you. Even to the point where I didn't even know Kroger's had an app that told you what aisle things go.
Yes, I learned it. You put in your store. And like the store specific, but then you search like, okay, so tahini, I didn't ever buy that before. And I put it in and it was like, it's on aisle 3. And then you go to aisle 3 and that's much easier because like one side is like tortillas and stuff. I knew it wasn't there. So I like narrowed it down. But if we can teach our students to also rely on that, they can
That's
be way more independent.
That's going to be something I share with my husband, who's been doing a lot of the shopping lately. I couldn't find this. Oh, yes, I know where it is now. But we'll get back to real. You have a quick question, Michelle, that you got from Kim Thomas.
Yes. So Kim said, when we Google the foundational evidence-based practices, for example, time delay, did you say to add evidence-based practices to it when Googled? In other words, Google time delay evidence-based practices.
Or EBP.
Or EBP.
Yes. So when I would just Google time delay, EBP, but you could probably spell it out. I made sure before I did this that it did pop up, and it'll come up with, hold on, I have it pulled up. I have one pulled up here. I typed in reinforcement EBP, and then 1, 2, 3, the third and fourth were that it's called a brief packet from Eric. So when you open it, it's actually really pretty colorful. It's really a brief packet. It just gives a brief overview of each of these evidence-based practices. It gives a little bit more detail than I did. I mean, we have whole classes on these, like semester long, so we could do, but this is a really nice, like teachers can understand it. It's not researchy.
Mm-hmm. That's real tips and tricks that can
Right.
be shared with them too. Awesome. Yeah, that's, when I'm sitting down to cook something, it's the first thing I'm doing is I'm Googling something and coming up with different ideas. And the same thing when I'm sitting down working with students and teachers and so forth. So.
And somebody put in the chat that they like the affirm modules for those evidence-based practices. That's from University of North Carolina.
Uh-huh.
There are also, it's called autism internet modules. So it's AIM modules, and they're free. They have way more than this, but they also have these 5 foundational evidence-based practices, a module with video, way more information. Like they're probably 2 to 2.5 hours for each complete module.
Okay. So that kind of reverts back to one of the earlier questions we had. Catherine was asking, what resources are there to train the paraprofessionals? And I would assume then you're thinking about going to some of these online resources like Eric Brief or Affirm or AIM modules.
Right. So I trained my own paraprofessionals, but I had extensive training. My undergraduate and master's program prepared me to teach about these evidence-based practices. But there are, I know the people at University of North Carolina, I have not looked at their modules, but I'm sure that they are definitely backed in the research. So, and as well with the AIM module, I have looked at the AIM modules, and some of my students go through some of those when they're first starting out in our programs. So
yeah, I'm familiar with the AIM modules as well, but I will go and take a look at that Affirm one.
me too, I'm writing it down.
Great resources. So it was interesting because that question about training parapros was early on, and we just naturally kind of evolved to uncovering it.
Well,
Go ahead.
I was going to say that is one really important thing that in consideration of using these evidence-based practices is that everyone needs to be using them the same way, or they don't become evidence-based. They're only evidence-based practices in the way that you use them. So if you are implementing this correctly, but then your paraprofessionals are doing something very different, your students are not going to have, it's not that they won't learn the content, but they're not going to learn it as efficiently. And sometimes it really interferes with their learning. That's why we try not to let them practice things wrong 20 times. We want to jump in and prompt them and then let them try again. So if you're doing that, but your paraprofessionals are allowing them to make errors for 20 minutes, it can become a problem. So that's a really good point.
Along those same lines, we know that by the time we get the learners in our class, at whatever age or developmental level we're working with them, the parents had them first and have been spending all this time I would always call it survival skills. So mom and dad and whoever else was their caretaker had to survive the day and we wanted to, get through things together. So sometimes the parents have integrated those tricks that work with their child that might be really opposite. How do you help parents understand that you don't want to give the whole bag of M&Ms just to get them to do, a couple of things, because it kind of, it backfires at the end of the game.
Do you have another hour?
I know.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we
It's a
close
good-
down because of remote, because of the world we're living in now.
It's a good question,
yeah.
but I would also say this for a teacher who doesn't believe that you need to do any of this too. If you can pick one skill and you can teach it using one of these evidence-based practices, they become a believer, especially if it's the skill parents don't think they can do. We have a lot of parents who don't believe our kids can be independent, who don't believe our kids can. I had a parent who's like, crying. I never believed he could wash the laundry. I'm like, this is like the first skill you can't mess up towels, right? So you just let them wash the towels until they figure it out. But like, of course he can wash the laundry. Like here's a video of your washing machine. I'm going to come into your home. I'm going to video it. He'll be washing the laundry by Saturday. I mean, I don't know. But it's like, they truly don't believe they can do it. And sometimes it's like a give and a take. So I had a student who gets whatever she wants. She got whatever she wanted all the time, which made my job very hard. And potty training was very important to the mom. I mean, very important. And so we worked out an agreement that she could not have candy. That was like her ultimate reinforcer, unless, well, first it was like just tolerating sitting on the potty. She would get some, but then it was like, then you have to go. So, and we didn't withhold it forever, but like, you don't have to have candy. If you want the candy, then these are the behaviors you have to do. And the mom was so willing to see if it would work that she gave up candy at home. But sometimes it's like, you find, if you can get them exposed to it a little bit, they become believers, because it does work. And when you can also have the conversation that like, I understand that like right now you're just trying to survive, but this child cannot have a king size bag of M&Ms for every task they complete when they're 40. Like, it's not going to be cute when they have like diabetes because you've given them. Now, I'm not opposed to food as a reinforcer, but I am opposed to like just giving the food for not like truly nothing. Like, we're just to appease someone. That's not, our society doesn't really operate that way. So we're trying to make them independent individuals, as independent as they can be. And so at a young age, we have to start changing the way the parents perceive, it's like the little kid who is so cute and he's in everyone's lap. And I'm like, it's not going to be cute when he's 20. Get him out of your lap. Like, he's 7. No other 7-year-old in the school is having calendar time in their teacher's lap. He needs to learn to sit independently. While he is cute and little, he is not going to be this little forever. And so we have to stop that behavior when he's little. It's easier to undo 7 years of behavior than 17. That's what I always say.
That's a really good mantra. And it's funny because you meet parents who will say, my child, like we have that, one of our units is on table service, right? We've got a lot of different units on working in the restaurant and hotel and tourism, tons of different lessons about that. But one of them, we do the setting of the table, right? And I've heard parents who will say things like, set the table. Sure, my child's been setting the table all the time, but I just don't let them, handle the glassware, anything that could break. And so, well, guess what? If you want them to get a job, a job, and they're gonna be in a restaurant, they've got to be able to handle a piece of glassware that could break. And we need to teach them how to do it carefully, responsibly, and what to do if it breaks. So, and that's what our curriculum goes into and does. But it is like, you realize these parents have had them and they've been in isolation and they're so grateful for anybody who wants to help them with their child. But sometimes you're right, you just have to sell it to the parent. That's what you're really doing. You're selling the parent with that proof. Oh, it can work. Let's see.
And sometimes it's just listening to the parent and what their goals are for their child. So just because it's your goal doesn't mean it's the parent's goal. And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes we need a little education on why we could have bigger goals. Like, your child can be independent. I've seen it. Like they can do these things, but
Mhm.
sometimes the parents' goals are realistic for their given circumstances. And so sometimes we as teachers need to reevaluate how we're approaching what we think is right. That's a hard one. I've become a lot more understanding of a parent since I became a parent. A lot of parents are just surviving, like giving the M&Ms, they are surviving. So it's our job to help them find using our evidence-based practices, another way to help them survive that may not be like a 5-pound bag of candy, but some of them are just trying to survive. It's like, if this makes you quiet and happy, just take it.
Mhm.
I understand that a little bit on a more deeper level since I've had children.
Yes, as a mother, I can also share that's so true. But you're right, we really could spend another hour on all of these things, especially on working with parents and, doing remote. And we'll just say, folks have asked whether or not this is going to be shared. And yes, we absolutely share all these slides. In fact, Michelle has put it into the chat, but under Education Associates, as a matter of fact, I think I even have it. So we'll show. But wait, so there's a lot of information up on our website, both on funding, which is out there. And I was going to go into a little bit more, but you can go on up to the website and get a resource guide for free about what funding could support the programs and so forth. But I think what I was going to, oops, wait, I just went back too fast. There we go. That on our site, Education Associates .com/resources/webinar-Wednesdays, that this recording will be up there within a few days. It's not automatic, we have to kind of compress it, but this will be up there, as well as the last year's, I think this is our 14th one or something, so the last year's worth of recordings. And we spoke with educators who were using these materials, using the evidence-based practices that you helped us put into our curriculum, and how they were doing that in face-to-face or remote or hybrid or whatever's coming next, because we need to be prepared for anything. So there's enough resources in this curriculum that you can pick and choose and figure out what was going to come and how you could possibly modify it for each of the learners that you have in your class as we're going on through. So I do highly recommend that. The other thing that we have, if it wants to do it nicely, oops, it didn't. Oh, I see. It brought me to the slide. I'm so sorry. I clicked in the middle and not the slide. You always kind of talk to yourself, don't you? But the other thing that we do have on each one of our pages on our website is this little red box. And that's where you can sign up for a newsletter. And our newsletters each month kind of do a little bit of a recap of what we've learned from folks like Dr. Spriggs. And here's another example, Cheryl Hubbard George from South Carolina. And so we do a little bit of a recap. So these are not like salesy newsletters. They're more informative. Would be great for the Parapro to continue their ongoing absorption of the information, because as adults, we need to hear it more than once. And I think that that's a good piece. And we also have other pieces in here, like an interactive preview kit. So there's a lot of information up on that website. We do invite you to come on in and take a look. And if you still have questions, if you go to educationassociates.com/resources/Zoom, you can actually pick and choose a day and a time on a calendar that would work for you to learn more. I've had a lot of educators who've just said, especially the administrators, say, well, you know what? We have a staff meeting on Thursday, the 11th at such and such 2 o'clock, and they'll go and they'll pick it out, and we'll do that bit of an overview for their staff. And it really helps in so many different ways. So lots of resources for you up on our website. And as we said, Dr. Spriggs was the one who kind of helped us with our adaptation of our career exploration. So Michelle, do you have anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think that, Amy, we really, really appreciated having you here today. Thank you for everything. I love listening to you. everybody, thank you all for attending. If you have any questions or you want to reach out and get a copy, like a PDF copy of the PowerPoint, you're welcome to email me at mmagrum@educationassociates.com, right there at the left bottom portion of the screen. And I'm also happy to talk to you about our solutions for your students because, as we've mentioned, we do incorporate these evidence-based practices into our curriculum. We also find ways, we were talking about parental engagement and stuff. We have parental involvement brochures that come along with all of our curriculum. We have tons and tons of research and evidence-based solutions for your students. So I'm happy to speak with you about that as well. Just feel free to email me or you can sign up for a Zoom. But thank you all again. Great to see some of you again. I always look through and see some repeat names on here. So we appreciate all of our repeat webinar attendees. So thank you all. Have a wonderful day.
And there will be a little survey. So when you click out of this, when we shut it on down, it'll pop up on your screen right away. That's a great place to tell us what other topics you'd like us to cover, because we're still planning out our whole schedule for the year, and that will help us a great way. I'm writing down parental involvement. We might invite you back for that, Amy. It's a big topic, you're right, and we could keep on going for a long time, but thank you all so much for your time today. We appreciate you with all you do with our students all over the country. Sometimes we have people internationally here too, so all over the world. Changing the world. Love you all. Thank you all so much. And thank you so much, Dr. Spriggs. Truly appreciate you. Michelle, have a good day.
You
Feel
too.
great.
Bye, guys.
All righty. Take care. And we'll stop that. There we go.